welcome to Tell Me What You Don't Like About Yourself, a Nip Tuck Rewatch podcast where we're looking back at the Rosetta Stone of the Ryan Murphy universe through a rainbow lens with 20 years of hindsight. I'm Amanda, your host. I started watching Nip Tuck when I was 17, and I have not been the same since. You may be asking yourself, why a Nip Tuck podcast? Why now? I wanted to make this podcast partly because I love pop culture and rewatching shows through a queer lens, but also because I find Nip Tuck fascinating. Sometimes it's brilliant. Yes, sometimes it's messy, but it's never boring. Let me take you on a little trip back in time. It's 2003. America's in its Bush era spiral. We're post 9/11, pre-iPhone, and absolutely drowning in low-rise jeans, frosted lip gloss, and reality TV. Extreme Makeover was convincing people that plastic surgery could fix your soul. Suddenly, it isn't a taboo topic anymore. It's primetime entertainment. Meanwhile, queerness was bubbling just beneath the surface. Will and Grace and Queer Eye for the Straight Guy were big, and Queer as Folk was out there serving a gay audience, but everything else was coded, subtextual, or played for shock. We didn't even have gay marriage in Canada yet. That wouldn't happen until 2005. It's also a weird time for masculinity. We're deep into the sad white men who have it all but want more era. Enter Sean McNamara. Handsome, successful, wildly unhappy, and ready to sabotage everything he loves. Let me introduce you to the main players of Nip Tuck. Sean McNamara, played by Dylan Walsh. A plastic surgeon, a father, and, critically, a white man in the early 2000s suffering from affluenza of the soul. Sean belongs to a very specific genre of turn-of-the-millennium male protagonist. The deeply unhappy man who has a big house, a beautiful wife, a thriving career, and still wakes up every morning with the emotional texture of wet toast. He's like if American Beauty's Lester Burnham got a medical license instead of buying weed from his neighbor's son. Christian Troy, played by Julian McMahon. Then we have Dr. Christian Troy. He's charming, reckless, and has the fashion sense of a club promoter who moonlights as a cologne bottle. He's also deeply devoted to anyone he considers family, and keep an eye out for hints of a very troubled past. Julia McNamara, played by Jolie Richardson. She put her dreams on hold to support Sean and raise a family. Now she's done. Julia is in her what if I went to med school instead of crying in my fancy house era, and her simmering frustration is only just starting to boil over. Liz Cruz, played by Roma Mafia. The anesthesiologist. The eye roll in human form. The only one in the room with a functioning moral compass. A lesbian icon who doesn't get a ton to do in this episode, but is the literal best. Matt McNamara, played by John Hensley. He's the son of Sean and Julia, and Matt actually seems pretty normal when things kick off. Ryan Murphy loves a chaotic boy with good cheekbones, and Matt is that. Kimber Henry, played by Kelly Carlson. Kimber arrives like a bottle blonde Chekhov's gun. She's hot, she's underestimated, and she's about to become a recurring player in ways no one's ready for. In the pilot, she's mostly just vibes and a victim of Christian's narcissism, but her arc is only just beginning. All right, on to the recap. Today we are talking about the pilot of Nip Tuck, which was written and directed by Ryan Murphy and originally aired on July 22nd, 2003. Just to set the scene, if you've never watched Nip Tuck before, a lot of people compared it to Miami Vice, which I'm a child of the 90s, so I haven't really seen. I always have compared it to Wild Things. The whole sort of Florida, glitzy, crime, that sort of genre. And if you haven't seen Wild Things, I'm sorry, but I don't know what we're even doing here. Stop listening to this and go watch Wild Things, and then come join me again. But back to Nip Tuck. We open with our first consult. It's Silvio Perez, a man who basically wants an entirely new face. He allegedly doesn't speak English, so his brother Alejandro is doing most of the talking. Sean, who's handling this consultation solo, is uncomfortable with the language barrier and decides to swap places with Christian. Christian, who is fluent in Spanish and also in criminal energy, immediately clocks their cartel and on the run. Silvio admits that he was, and I quote, with the boss's girl. Initially, Christian does refuse to do the surgery, until Alejandro ups the offer to $300,000, which is far beyond McNamara Troy's standard $20,000 fee. After the consult, Christian's heading out on the town to seduce future plot lines. He meets Kimber at a bar. She's unimpressed until he name drops his profession like a human business card. Now we get the first of what will be many, many sex montages. We have an intercut scene between Christian and Kimber, very early 2000s, a lot of quick cuts, a lot of, can you believe they're letting us do this on TV? Christian snorting cocaine off Kimber's ass at one point. This is intercut with Sean and Julia having sex, and it's completely different. Julia's making a grocery list in her head, and Sean's thinking about firing their gardener, Julio, who he says trims hedges like he's drunk. We also have our first hint of the queer moments to come between Sean and Christian, because the climax, I'm so sorry, of these two scenes are cut together to basically make it look like Christian and Sean are having sex with each other. We then cut to the next morning. Christian switched into full negging mode. Kimber's talking about being a perfect 10, and Christian's basically like, honey, you wish. He starts running through all the procedures he could do that would, in his eyes, turn Kimber into that perfect 10. He takes a lipstick and draws all over her body, showing what he would change, which causes Kimber to ask, am I really this ugly? I was homecoming queen, which really feels like a Ryan Murphy line if ever there was one. Over at the McNamara's, Julia, who is clearly in I just want my husband to tell me I look nice mode, mentions to Sean that after having 2 kids and nursing their daughter, she's thinking of having her boobs done. After a quick peek, Sean declares that gravitationally, they're exactly where they should be, which is something that no one ever wants to hear. Also in this scene, Sean tells Julia that he told their daughter Annie that she could permanently adopt her class gerbil. Julia is annoyed. She already told Annie she couldn't. Sean, quite dismissively, is basically like, we have a maid, it's no big deal. Now it's time for breakfast with the McNamara family. Sean asks his teenage son Matt about the book he's reading. Matt and his little sister Annie point out that Sean already asked Matt about this same book last week. Make a note here. Sean does not pay attention to his family. Matt starts regaling Annie with tales of alligators in the Everglades, and how they're picky eaters who won't eat human flesh, but evidently love wild boar or pork. Let's put a pin in this. We're going to go back. We revisit the Sean doesn't speak Spanish plot point, where everyone is happily conversing in Spanish around him. Sean's annoyed that they're speaking in a foreign language he doesn't understand. Julia points out that they're in Florida, and English is the foreign language. After breakfast, Sean's off to work. He passes by Julio the gardener and can't bring himself to fire him, even though, sorry Julio, he is objectively terrible at his job. We're picking up on another theme here. Sean is bad at confrontation. A little while later, Matt's skipping school to hang out with Christian on his boat. I have to tell you that Christian's boat is named the Boat Ox, which is, I'm sorry, pretty great. Christian and Matt's relationship is clearly, I think my dad kind of sucks and you're the cool one. We find out Matt wants some kind of unspecified surgery, but doesn't think Sean will okay it. Matt calls his dad an asshole, which immediately changes the tone of the scene. Christian gets his back up and snaps that Matt has no idea how lucky he has it. Visibly forcing himself to relax, Christian jokes that anyway, Sean's not an asshole. He's a robot. Back at the practice, a woman comes in desperate for help for her badly burned son. Sean turns her away because they're too busy and can't fit in the surgery. She absolutely lays into him and literally says, shame on you. After this, Sean and Christian are scrubbing in for the Silvio Perez surgery. Sean's like, get this, Julia's worried about her breasts. There's some banter, and it sets up our main dynamic for the trio. According to Sean, Christian and Julia went on one date and she didn't even let Christian kiss her. He jokes that Christian still has a crush on the missus. Things start escalating from playful to an actual fight. Sean thinks they let people externalize the hate they feel about themselves. He wants to hire a full-time psychologist to screen their patients better. Christian points out that what they do is a business. Sean isn't sure he wants to be in this business anymore. Now we have our first surgery montage. This one is set to Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones, and it is very gross, but we must all get used to this. I'd actually kind of forgotten how gross they are. Like, it's really intense. When Sean and Silvio Perez's brother Alejandro are discussing Silvio's recovery, which will happen in a hospital because McNamara Troy doesn't have a recovery suite yet, Alejandro asks Sean if everything's included in the $300,000. Of course, the $300,000 is news to Sean. An angry Sean, and just if Sean is doing something in this episode, assume he is doing it angrily, finds Christian and basically accuses him of pocketing the extra money. Rude. Christian tells Sean to check their accounts. He put it into their business. Sean's also like, it's drug money, isn't it? And Christian's like, I didn't ask. Sean also finds out that Christian's planning a marble steam room as part of the new McNamara Troy recovery space, and he thinks this is a ridiculous expense, and they should be focusing on more important things. Later on, Julia shows up at the office and has a chat with Mrs. Grubman, who is clearly a regular patient, but we'll get back to Mrs. Grubman in a future episode. Christian comes out, and he's genuinely really happy to see Julia. He's also oozing boundary-crossing energy. Julia's there for Matt, who's finally going to talk to Sean about the circumcision, that's the surgery, that he wants. Christian wants Julia to have him over to the house because I miss my family. Sean's meeting with Matt, and as predicted, despite Matt's pretty mature and rational case, refuses to do the surgery. Next up, Christian's at the hospital to check on a recovering Silvio, except they can't find him. Alejandro immediately knows where to look and seems deeply upset when they do find him there. Pediatrics. Silvio was giving a little girl his ice cream. And yes, it is exactly as creepy as it sounds. Christian immediately moves to check that the kid's okay. As Silvio heads to the elevator, Christian asks for clarification on Silvio being with the boss's girl. Alejandro admits it was the boss's 6-year-old daughter. Of course, Christian is horrified by this. We're back at McNamara Troy. Sean and Liz are trying to check on Kimber, who is sobbing and wondering where Christian is because she thought they were going to be together. Liz is like, he does this all the time. At least you got a nice pair of tits out of it. Try to move on with your life. Sean is not happy with Liz's response. Liz yells at him and says Christian's behavior reflects on all of them. Sean, now driving somewhere and overwhelmed by basically everything, is using an audio tape to learn Spanish. He's getting increasingly upset, and when Christian calls, Sean answers with an aggressive "Hola" that is truly hilarious. Julian McMahon usually gets the funny, sillier plot lines, but Dylan Walsh is really funny. Now, Sean fully unloads on Christian. We get the sense this has been building for a long time. Sean actually, at one point, says, the mute finally speaks. He officially announces that he's quitting the practice and that Christian has made himself so repugnant to Sean that Sean's finally taking control of his own life. Over at Shea McNamara, Julia is watching a tape from 1987 of the trio in happier days. They're getting Sean high for the first time, and the three of them are talking about what they want out of life. Christian would like a nice girl like Julia. Hint, hint. Sean wants to help people, and Julia just wants to be happy. I also feel like I need to know that Sean is wearing a backwards baseball cap in this, which was kind of considered the height of fashion back then, but it does look quite funny. Julia's nostalgia spiral is interrupted by Christian, who lets Julia know what's going on with Sean. Julia has no idea that Sean has just decided to leave the practice. Christian reminisces about how Sean used to tell him everything, and he also tells Julia that he misses him. He thinks our boy is having a midlife crisis. Christian mentions Julia's breast-related concerns. Julia admits that she only asked so Sean would tell her she didn't need them. Christian's all like, let me look, I'm a professional. And Julia agrees and unbuttons her top. Jolie Richardson does this awesome, defiant little shoulders back move. Christian does his little mini consult, which he mainly uses as an excuse to cop a feel. And then, quite breathily, says, I can't recommend surgery, Julia. Your breasts are perfect. At this point, they're interrupted by Julia's daughter, Annie, and her excited cry of, Uncle Chris. Annie is proudly showing off her new gerbil, who she's named Frisky. We're back with Sean, who is now in full woman on the verge mode. He comes home and immediately fires Julio the gardener, and then has a massive blow-up with Julia. Julia is pissed that Sean didn't tell her that he left the practice. This fight scene is genuinely really awful. Even if you're watching this for the first time and you don't really know the characters yet, it's really upsetting. Sean asks if they're doing total honesty, and a frightened-looking Julia nods. Sean admits that he doesn't respect her anymore, that all she does is shop and go to lunch with her girlfriends. Sean says the life he's given her is pretty great. Understandably pissed off Julia shouts back, you gave me nothing. I made this life with you. Julia wants to go back to med school and doesn't want to put that on hold for Sean's midlife crisis. We hop along a bit and Christian drops by Sean's shabby new office, where he's sleeping on the couch. Both this and the Julia scene are very much about how the three of them have built this practice together. It's finally starting to take off, and Julia and Christian are not going to let Sean walk away and fuck it up for everybody else. We establish the running theme here that Christian is the salesman and Sean is the talent. Christian says they're on the cusp of the American dream, which Sean insists isn't his dream anymore. Christian, evidently deciding a drama queen moment is in order, pulls out a frame with the first dollar he and Sean ever made. He smashes the frame and is all like, I'll be keeping the dollar and literally everything else you own. They have a contract. Sean has to buy him out. Sean's like, you wouldn't. A furious Christian? Try me. After a tense few moments, Sean points out that Christian has to sign Silvio Perez out of the hospital. Christian declares, let him rot. Back at the McNamara house of broken dreams and despair, Julie is filling out a University of Miami application. She asks Matt to help clean the pool and starts crying when he mentions that he'll get to it later. Matt's like, okay, that's fine. I'll do it now. Annie's gerbil Frisky, who's been MIA for a few days, suddenly pops up in a cereal box. Julia, clearly still talking about Sean, declares, I'm not going to clean up your shit anymore. Just a warning for any animal lovers out there, me included. At this point, she does grab Frisky and flush him down the toilet. R.I.P. Frisky. Now we're in the lobby of a fancy hotel. Christian sees a little boy with his dad. This spurs on some flashbacks for Christian. We start seeing quick cuts of little boy Christian, and he's being called into a room by someone he calls Mr. Troy. You really get the sense that this is bad, but we don't dig too much into it in this episode. Christian shakes it off, and he heads to what's clearly some kind of Botox party. There's a lot of the comparison of plastic surgery and drugs in this scene, with a woman, her name is Celia, asking if he brought the good stuff. She also asks where his partner is, because she said she wanted 2 doctors. There's 10 girls there. Christian declares, I've done 10 women before, because of course he does. When we're back with Sean, he's at the hospital checking on Silvio, who says that now the girls will not be able to resist me, which is really creepy, and causes Alejandro to hang his head. Alejandro then asks Sean if they could transform Silvio's waistline, like they did his face. Sean's not interested, until Alejandro offers $20,000 in cash. We're back with Christian at the Botox party, who tells Celia that tomorrow she'll be one hot bitch. And Celia's like, you mean hotter, because Celia's pretty cool. Celia tells Christian she has one more girlfriend waiting to see him. It's not a girlfriend. In strolls the coolest looking man you have ever seen, wearing a boxy gray suit. Everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Robert Lizardo as Escobar Gallardo, Celia's boyfriend and former boss of Silvio Perez. Christian makes the most oh shit face you've ever seen in your life. You know how sometimes a guest star shows up, and even though it would make no sense, you immediately want them to be made a series regular? That's the feeling with Escobar. If the writers decided to have Escobar leave cartel life, become a plastic surgeon, and the practice changed to McNamara Troy Gallardo, I would have been fully on board. We're back with Sean for a bit. He's sitting by the water, contemplating whether or not to do the surgery. It genuinely looks like, you know, on Seinfeld when George and then Jerry are contemplating proposing? That's what the scene looks like. Sean's conflicted, and he's worried about what Matt would think of him if he agreed to the surgery. We then have a hard cut to one of Escobar's henchmen holding a shirtless Christian down in a bathtub full of water. Just as a little aside, it's really interesting, especially considering we're very much in the era of if you see a lady on TV, she's probably going to be scantily clad, to watch Nip Tuck flip the script. From the beginning, it's far more likely to objectify its male characters. But back to the matter at hand. Escobar knows Christian operated on Silvio Perez. He checked around town, and all of Miami's other plastic surgeons turned Silvio down. These other plastic surgeons were also quite open about the fact that they thought Christian lacks ethics and was the only one of them shady enough to agree to take a child molester on as a client. Christian is clearly upset by this, as one would be. Escobar is even more upset and shouts, Silvio stole that money. He stole my daughter's innocence. This finally moves Christian, and he gives up the hospital that Silvio's been recovering in. Except he's not there. We're back at Sean's new office, I think. I have to be honest, the location jumping in the pilot kind of confused me a little bit because we sort of go between McNamara Troy and the hospital and Sean's office, but it doesn't really matter because we're just going to be back at McNamara Troy for the next episode. But we're currently at Sean's new office because Dr. High Horse himself, Sean McNamara, has agreed to do the lipo on Silvio. Alejandro is trying to convince Sean to let him stay in the operating room, which I'm sure is totally fine and won't backfire at all. Sean says no, until Alejandro offers another $5,000. I guess Sean figures he's in for a penny, in for a pound at this point, because he agrees to let Alejandro stay. This is a terrible idea, because we will shortly discover that Alejandro has a gun tucked into his pants. Meanwhile, the Escobar Christian torture session has moved to the living room. There are candles and candelabras and a roaring fireplace. It definitely has a weirdly erotic vibe. Christian, clad only in Versace undies, has been tied to a chair, and Escobar is now asking about why Christian's partner didn't come along today. He was looking forward to meeting him. Christian immediately lies that Sean's in San Francisco. Escobar starts asking questions about the effects of Botox. As he's asking these questions, he's also steadily undressing. He slaps Christian around a bit, and he's really generally pissed and wants to know why Christian is protecting a child molester. Escobar knows that Sean checked Silvio Perez out of the hospital, which of course is news to Christian. At this point, Escobar stabs a bunch of Botox-filled syringes into Christian's face. Back at Sean's new place, he's mid-lipo on Silvio when Alejandro makes his move with the gun. Alejandro wants him to wake Silvio up during the surgery. He threatens to shoot Sean and Liz if they don't. Sean gives Liz the go-ahead to just do it. Silvio wakes up, and it's really incredibly gross. Of course, he deserves it, but it's a gross scene. Alejandro starts talking to him and explaining that he found out his girlfriend's pregnant and he's going to have a daughter. He won't risk letting Silvio anywhere near her. He tells Silvio that he's sick and has brought shame on their family for the last time. He tries to get Silvio to forgive him, which isn't happening. Then Silvio starts blindly grabbing for stuff and ends up with the hose they used to suck the fat out during liposuction. He's in a struggle for the hose with Sean, and it ends up spraying fat everywhere. It's definitely one of those nip tuck moments that once you've seen it, you'll never ever forget it. Alejandro cranks the anesthesia controls to deliver a fatal dose. We're back with Christian and Escobar. Escobar is still stabbing Christian with Botox, but they're down to the last one. Escobar gives him one last chance. He knows that Sean didn't go back to McNamara Troy, and he wants to know where he went. Christian, still refusing to give up the address of Sean's new office, stares Escobar down as Escobar drags a Botox syringe down his chest and taps it on his underwear. There's no polite way to say this. Escobar delivers the final Botox shot right into Christian's dick. Escobar is also having the best time. He's laughing and he's like, "That looks painful, man." At this moment, Sean calls Christian. Escobar answers, and Christian immediately shouts for Sean to hang up the phone. Christian is still trying to protect Sean. This will become a running theme. Christian's willing to sacrifice his body to protect Sean in a way that doesn't feel like Sean would do for him. Escobar asks Sean where Silvio Perez is, and I guess Sean just tells him, because soon everybody's rolling into the scene of the crime operating room. Christian's shocked at the state Liz and Sean are in. Sean's shocked at the state Christian's in. Alejandro tells Escobar that he killed his brother. And a quite frankly shockingly forgiving Escobar tells Alejandro that he chose the right family and invites Alejandro to come with him. Sean wants to know what they're supposed to do with Silvio's body. Escobar tells Sean that's his problem. They leave, and Christian, Sean, and Liz are freaking out. Christian says they have to go to the police. Sean points out that Silvio died of an anesthesia overdose, and the police will never believe their story. He's worried that he and Liz will lose their medical licenses. Liz tells them to fix it and storms off. Christian asks Sean what they're going to do. Then, one of the greatest visuals ever in a Ryan Murphy show. Sean and Christian, disheveled, and in Christian's case, bloody and bruised, in a grocery store, buying an entire cart full of hams. This is not a metaphor. Also, the way Julian McMahon plays Christian steadily adding the hams one at a time to the conveyor belt is just so deeply hilarious. After checking out, Sean notices that Christian's face is starting to droop. Dylan Walsh gets another very funny line delivery with, "Are you having a stroke?" Christian says that the Botox hit the motor control centers in his face. Sean still doesn't understand why Escobar shot Christian full of Botox. Christian admits it's because he couldn't tell Escobar where Silvio was, and he wouldn't tell him where Sean was. Then we have our line of the episode. Christian asks Sean, "Do you mind telling me why we bought 12 goddamn hams?" To which Sean replies, "Because alligators are finicky eaters." That's right, we're looping back to the mass scene at the beginning of the episode, and we are now talking literal ham-based evidence disposal. Next thing we know, Christian and Sean are in the Everglades, tying the previously mentioned hams to the remains of Silvio Perez. We also see an alligator starting to make its move. A teary Christian tells Sean that when he booked the surgery, he didn't know what Silvio had done. Christian would never have agreed to it. That he'd never operate on someone who could hurt our Annie. Sean's response? I need to believe that. Which, considering Christian is clearly being genuine and has just taken a shit ton of Botox to protect Sean, is kind of a dick move on Sean's part. Christian agrees that they should hire a full-time psychologist to better screen their patients. Sean tells Christian that he also wants 20% of their clients to be pro bono from now on. It's time to clean up the car. At one point, Sean does that thing where you lick your finger to scrub something clean, and Christian tells him, "You're a little too good at this. You're scaring me." And Sean replies, "Good. It's good you're scared of me." And watching this scene now, knowing Ryan Murphy's penchant for murder shows, it does kind of feel like there's an alternate universe version of Nip Tuck where Sean just straight up murders everybody. And then Liz and Nurse Linda end up making a very successful true crime podcast about the case. But in this universe, the trunk lid snaps down, and that's a wrap on the pilot. But we're not done yet. Welcome to Aftercare, the part of the episode where we talk fashion, queerness, and all the glossy chaos that makes Nip Tuck what it is. Let's start with this week's Lou Eyrick Look of the Week. This segment is, of course, named in honor of the legendary costume designer behind Nip Tuck, Glee, American Horror Story, and pretty much every unforgettable outfit in the Ryan Murphy universe. First up, Christian Troy, strutting through the episode in a black blazer, a bold red button-down open just enough, and red-tinted sunglasses that practically glow with 2003 sleeves. It's a look that says, "I do lines in my convertible and call it self-care." Think very early 2000s Maxim cover boy. Did Maxim even have cover boys? Maybe it was just sexy ladies. I'm not sure. Anyway, I went into this episode pretty confident that was going to be my pick because I really remembered it from back when I first watched it. But then, at the very end, Escobar Gallardo arrives. And friends, he is wearing a dove gray suit that says, "Yes, I'm a drug lord. Yes, I'm probably going to kill someone, but I'm going to do it while looking like I just stepped out of a catalog called Soft Criminal." And the winner is, it's gotta be Escobar. I'm so sorry, Christian. Now we're moving on to No Hetero, Queer Undertones and Overtones, the segment where we highlight everything in this episode that radiated undeniable queer energy, whether it was intentional, subliminal, or just Ryan Murphy being Ryan Murphy. I mentioned during the recap that the Christian and Kimber and Sean and Julia sex scenes wind up intercut to make it look like Sean and Christian are having sex with each other, and I just think that bears repeating here because this show is coming in hot. There's also the Escobar and Christian scenes, which definitely fall into the category of weird but hot, otherwise known as Ryan Murphy's specialty. Getting back to Sean and Christian for a minute, one thing that really stands out is the possessive language that Christian uses. He calls Sean our boy when speaking to Julia. He refers to Sean and Julia's daughter Annie as our Annie when speaking to Sean. Christian is always reinforcing this idea that he belongs in Sean's family in a way that doesn't feel strictly platonic. The thing about Nip Tuck is that its queerness isn't just in the characters. It's also in the tone, in the aesthetic, in the sheer... I'm sorry, I know Ryan Murphy hates when his shows are described as campy, but it really does fit. In the sheer camp of the storytelling, from its obsession with vanity and transformation to its use of hyperdramatic tension, this is a show that feels queer, even when it's not explicitly addressing queer themes. It also doesn't shy away from fully exploring sexuality. Yes, sometimes it does this poorly. It is the early 2000s. But other times it leans into the complexities of attraction, gender, and identity in ways that feel surprisingly layered for the time. Finally, that brings us to this week's scalpel moment, the scene that cut the deepest, metaphorically or literally. It might be raw emotion, narrative clarity, or just something that made me sit up and say, "Okay, show, you've got my attention." This week's scalpel moment is the fight scene between Sean and Julia. It's the moment they stop pretending, stop performing, and let every ugly thought spill out into the open. It's not just about this single argument. It's about everything leading up to it. Years of resentment, of compromise, of unfulfilled wants, and suffocating expectations finally collapsing in real time. It's raw, it's painful, and it's real. There's no cinematic dramatization here. It's just two people who have been quietly miserable for far too long, finally breaking under the pressure of it all. This scene is a turning point. It's raw, it's devastating, and it's one of the strongest emotional moments of the series. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you liked the episode, you can follow, subscribe, or whisper, "Scalpel, please," into the wind, and I'll probably hear it. Next time, we'll be cutting into Mandy/Randy. Until then, tell me what you don't like about yourself.